There is a place on this earth where the ground itself is a negotiation, where every field you walk through, every road you drive, every house you enter sits below the level of the sea, where the only reason the land exists at all is because, for 800 years, human beings refused to let the water win. This is the Netherlands. Amsterdam. Amsterdam was not built on solid ground. It was built on nothing, or more precisely, on sand, on peat, and on the stubborn will of merchants who needed a harbor. The city's oldest neighborhoods rest on millions of wooden piles driven into the soft earth, their tips preserved forever in the anaerobic mud below. The Royal Palace on Dam Square sits on 13,659 such piles, a fact every Dutch schoolchild is taught and no Dutch adult ever forgets. To walk Amsterdam is to walk on top of a forest, a buried, inverted, perfectly preserved forest of pine, stretching down into the dark beneath your feet. The Jordaan was once the city's working-class heart, a neighborhood of craftsmen, dyers, and Huguenot refugees who arrived from France in the 1680s. Today, it is Amsterdam's most desirable postcode. But unlike so many cities where gentrification erases the character of a place, the Jordaan has performed a more graceful transformation. The brown calves, the Bruin Krogen remain, the narrow houses remain. The sense that you are inside something intimate, something human-scaled and livable. The Dutch brown calf is one of the great overlooked institutions of European life. No cocktail menu, no mood lighting, no playlist selected by an algorithm, just beer, Genever, the juniper-based spirit that is the ancestor of English gin, and conversation. The atmosphere is created not by design, but by decades of smoke, spilled beer, and genuine human presence soaking into the walls. The British stole the recipe in the 17th century and gave the world gin. The Dutch, characteristically, are too polite to make a fuss about it. The canal ring, the Grachtengordel, is Amsterdam's greatest achievement of urban planning and one of the great feats of the 17th century. 4 concentric canals, Single, Herengracht, Keizersgracht, Prinsengracht, dug in a single generation during the Dutch Golden Age when Amsterdam was the wealthiest city on earth. Not in Europe, on earth. Amsterdam is a city that still wears its commercial origins on its face and sees no reason to be embarrassed about it. In the shadow of the Westerkerk Tower, where Rembrandt is buried somewhere in an unmarked pauper's grave, is the Anne Frank House. There is always a queue. There is always silence among the people in that queue, because everyone understands, even before they enter, what they are about to encounter. A secret annex. 2 years. A diary. The most personal possible encounter with the most incomprehensible event of the 20th century. We will not show the interior. Some things resist being a backdrop for travel television, but we linger outside, because to pass by without acknowledging it would be to miss the other Amsterdam, one that exists beneath the postcard charm. This city has beauty. It has also carried horror. Both are true. Haarlem. 30 minutes west of Amsterdam, the city releases you. The Netherlands is a small country, smaller than West Virginia, but it contains multitudes. Beyond Amsterdam, beyond the ring of suburbs, you find the older Netherlands. The Netherlands of painters and cheesemakers, of flower growers and cattle farmers. You find Haarlem. Haarlem is what Amsterdam might have been if it had chosen a quieter life. It has the same beautiful bones, the canal houses, the cobblestones, the church spires, but without the density of tourists, without the pressure of being the most famous city in the country. People here have time. The terraces are fuller, the afternoons slower. The stroopwafel was invented in Haarlem in the early 19th century by a baker named Gerard Comfissen, who had the genius insight that two thin waffles sandwiching warm caramel syrup would be the perfect object. He was correct. Today, 300 million stroopwafels are produced in the Netherlands annually. One of them is for you, always, balanced on the rim of your coffee cup so the steam softens the caramel. This is not a tip. This is law. Dutch cheese is one of the great underestimated pleasures of European gastronomy. The supermarket wheel of young, rubbery Gouda that has traveled the world and colonized every airport shop bears only a theoretical relationship to the real thing, aged Belgian and extra Belgian Gouda, pressed and turned and matured until the interior develops crystals of tyrosine. The same thing you find in great Parmigiano Reggiano. It crunches slightly. It is sweet and sharp and nutty and entirely its own thing. I owe Dutch cheese an apology. The cheese markets of the Netherlands, Edam, Gouda, Alkmaar, were once the commercial engines of the country. Farmers brought their wheels by boat, had them weighed and graded, sold them to merchants who shipped them across the world. The red wax on an Edam ball was not decoration, it was protection for the long sea voyage to foreign markets. Delft. An hour south of Haarlem, the train delivers you to Delft, and Delft delivers you to an entirely different frequency of beauty. This is a city of canals and cobblestones, of linden trees leaning over still water, of a market square so perfectly proportioned that standing in its center feels like stepping inside a 17th century painting, which, in a very real sense, it is. Johannes Vermeer was born here in 1632, lived here his entire life, and died here in 1675. Leaving behind just 34 to 37 known paintings, depending on which scholars you consult, and an absolute revolution in the way human beings understand interior light. The girl with a pearl earring, the milkmaid, woman reading a letter, each one a small, still universe of domestic intimacy, painted with a patience and luminosity that has never quite been replicated. Vermeer never left Delft. He did not need to. The whole world was in the light that fell through a single north-facing window in his studio on the Oude Langendijk. To stand in the market square of Delft, the Markt, is to understand something about the ambition of Dutch Golden Age towns. The Nieuwe Kerk, the new church, completed in 1496, rises at one end. Inside it, Willem van Oranje, William of Orange, the father of the Dutch nation, the man who led the revolt against Spanish rule and gave the Netherlands its existence as an independent state, lies buried in an elaborate mausoleum. He was assassinated on the staircase of the Keukenhof, just across the market square, in 1584. The bullet holes are still in the wall. They have never filled them in. And then there is the pottery. You can watch the painters today, hunched over their pieces with the same fine brushes and the same cobalt pigment, painting the same windmills, the same tulips, the same canal scenes that their predecessors have painted for 3.5 centuries. There is something both humbling and deeply reassuring about that continuity. The idea that some forms of human attention resist obsolescence entirely. The Keukenhof. There is a moment, somewhere between the entrance and the first open garden, when the color stops you completely. Not one color. Every color. Red, yellow, white, deep violet, and a pink so saturated it seems to belong to a different spectrum entirely. Arranged in ruler straight bands across the flat Dutch earth, the tulip fields of the Bollenstreek stretch to a horizon so low and so wide that the sky above them feels like a second landscape laid on top of the first. The Keukenhof sits at the center of this world. 7 million bulbs planted across 32 hectares of formal garden. Beds and pathways, water features, and woodland walks. Each turn in the path opening onto a new arrangement of color that the previous turn gave no warning of. The scale of it is not immediately apparent from any single viewpoint. It reveals itself slowly as the visitor moves deeper into the garden and the beds multiply and the variety of the plantings tulips of every form, from the classic cup shape to the fringed, the parrot, the double-flowered, becomes its own kind of argument about what the word abundance actually means. Beyond the Keukenhof, the working bulb fields of the Bollenstreek extend across the flat agricultural plain between Haarlem and Leiden. These are not gardens. They are farms, commercial flower operations of enormous scale, whose bands of color, seen from above, reduce the landscape to something that resembles a painting more than a place. The rows are precise. The colors do not blend at their edges but meet in hard lines, one variety ending and the next beginning with the same abruptness that a decision makes. From the air, the Bollenstreek in full bloom is one of the most extraordinary agricultural landscapes on Earth. From the ground, standing at the edge of a field with the color extending in both directions, further than the eye resolves, it is simply overwhelming. The tulip fields open and close with the season. The color is there, and then it is gone, and the flat green fields return to their ordinary purpose. That brevity is part of what the landscape gives you. The understanding that what you are seeing is not permanent, that the intensity of it is inseparable from its transience. Kinderdijk. Southeast of Rotterdam, in the flat wetlands of the Alblasserwaard, 19 windmills stand in 2 rows along a canal. They turn in the wind slowly, as they have since the 18th century. From the air, the symmetry of it is almost architectural. The 2 lines of mills following the straight canal, the flat green polder stretching in every direction, the water catching the sky. From the ground, standing at the canal's edge with the nearest mill turning above you, the scale is something else entirely. The sails span 30 meters. The shadow they cast moves across the ground like the hand of a clock. This is Kinderdijk, one of the most quietly spectacular landscapes in Europe, and one of the most honestly purposeful. These windmills were not built for beauty. They were built because, without them, this land would not exist. The Alblasserwaard polder sits below sea level. The windmills pumped water from the fields up into the drainage channels and from there into the rivers beyond the dikes. For 500 years they pumped. The land that surrounds them, the farms, the roads, the villages, is here because the mills turn. The canal that runs between the 2 rows of windmills reflects them perfectly on still mornings, doubling the mills in the sky and the water below. In summer, the banks are green and the sails turn against blue. In winter, the mist sits low over the polder and the mills emerge from it slowly as you walk the canal path, each one appearing in the gray as the previous one recedes. Both versions of Kinderdijk are the same place, and entirely different experiences. The mills still turn. Not for pumping, that work is done now by electric stations along the waterway, but the turning continues, and the landscape it defines continues with it. 19 windmills in 2 rows along a canal, in the flat wetlands southeast of Rotterdam, exactly where they have always been. Geethorn. There are no roads here, no cars, no motorcycles, nothing with wheels. The village of Geethorn moves entirely on water. Its narrow canals the only corridors between the thatched farmhouses that sit directly at the water's edge, their gardens spilling down to private jetties, their reflections lying still in the canal below on quiet mornings. From above, Geethorn reads as a pattern of small islands connected by wooden footbridges, 180 of them, arching over the channels in a network so dense and so unhurried that the village looks less like a place that was built and more like a place that grew. The thatched rooftops, the willow trees leaning over the water, the boats moving slowly between the banks. From the air, it is one of the most quietly beautiful village landscapes in Europe. At water level, everything slows down. The boats that move through Geethorn's canals are electric, silent enough that the sounds of the countryside fill the space where engine noise would be. Water against the hull, wind in the reeds along the bank. A duck crossing the canal ahead of the bow, unimpressed. The thatched farmhouses pass slowly on both sides, their window boxes and garden roses close enough to touch from the boat. The wooden bridges of Geethorn cross the canals at intervals short enough that the village feels continuous even though it is not, each island connected to the next. The path from one end of the village to the other, a quiet sequence of water and wood, and the particular stillness that a place without engine noise eventually arrives at. In autumn, the light over the surrounding polders turns amber and low. The willow branches catch it. The canal surfaces hold it in long reflections that reach from bank to bank. Geethorn in that light, in that quiet, is the kind of place that stays with the people who find it long after they have left it behind. Rotterdam. Rotterdam does not look like the rest of the Netherlands. Where Amsterdam has canal houses and cobblestones, Rotterdam has glass and steel and concrete reaching upward in shapes that no other European city repeats. The skyline from the Maas River tells the story immediately. This is a city that was rebuilt from nothing and rebuilt without looking backward. The cube houses sit in the heart of the city, 45 homes tilted at 45 degrees and mounted on hexagonal pylons, their yellow angular forms stacked above the street like a geometry problem that someone decided to live inside. From below, looking up through the gap between the structures, the sky appears in unexpected shapes. From the Erasmus Bridge across the river, they read as a cluster of tilted cubes against the wider skyline. Small, specific, entirely unlike anything nearby. The Markthal rises beside them, a horseshoe arch of glass and apartments curving over an enclosed market hall, its interior ceiling a single enormous mural of oversized fruit and flowers painted across 8,000 square meters. From outside, the building is a vast curved form of steel and glass. From inside, standing in the market below and looking up, the ceiling is something else entirely, color and scale that the camera has to tilt upward to contain. The depot at Museum Boijmans stands apart from both, a mirrored sphere that reflects the surrounding city in a curved surface, distorting and doubling everything around it. The building holds the museum's entire collection in visible storage. Its exterior catches Rotterdam's sky and its neighboring buildings simultaneously, the reflection shifting as the light moves. At the port, the scale changes entirely. The port of Rotterdam extends 40 kilometers from the city to the North Sea coast. The largest port in Europe, its container terminals and cranes visible from the air as a vast industrial geometry stretching along the waterway. The automated cranes of Maasvlakte, two move without operators across a terminal built on land that did not exist before 2013. 2,000 hectares reclaimed from the sea, added to the coast, turned immediately to purpose. From above, the container stacks form colored grids that extend to the water's edge and stop where the North Sea begins. The Hague. The Hague carries itself differently from other Dutch cities. The streets are wider, the buildings more deliberate, the overall impression one of a city that understands its own weight and has arranged itself accordingly. This is where the Dutch government sits, where parliament meets, where the institutions of the state occupy buildings of considerable architectural ambition along tree-lined boulevards that feel designed for arrival rather than passage. The Peace Palace stands at the northern edge of the city, a building of red brick and stone towers and ornate iron gates, its scale and its formality announcing before any explanation is given that what happens inside it matters. The International Court of Justice holds its proceedings here. The building's facade, its formal gardens, its gated entrance on the Carnegieplein, all of it reads, from the street and from the air, as a place where the ordinary rules have been set aside in favor of something more considered. The Binnenhof sits at the center of The Hague. The inner court, a complex of Gothic towers and medieval halls that has been the seat of Dutch government for centuries. Its turrets rise above the Hofvijver pond that borders it to the south, and the reflection of the towers in the still water of the pond is one of the defining images of the city. From above, the Binnenhof reads as a cluster of pointed rooflines surrounded by the orderly grid of the city around it. Something medieval held inside something modern, the two scales coexisting without apparent difficulty. The Mauritshuis faces the Hofvijver from the opposite bank, a 17th century merchant's house of quiet, precise proportions, its double staircase reflected in the same water that reflects the Binnenhof towers behind it. Inside, the collection includes Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring and Rembrandt's The Anatomy Lesson, two of the most recognized paintings in Dutch art, held in rooms whose scale and light the building seems to have been designed specifically to provide. Scheveningen stretches along the North Sea coast to the west of the city. A wide sandy beach, a Victorian pier extending into the gray water, the long, flat horizon of the North Sea beyond. The light here is different from the city light, harder, more open, the kind of coastal light that the Dutch painters understood and that the coast still offers in exactly the same terms. Dutch food. The Dutch eat at street level, not in the sense of informality, though that is part of it, but literally. The food cart on the corner, the market stall, the herring stand beside the canal, where the vendor hands the fish across a zinc counter, and the customer tilts their head back and eats it whole. This is where Dutch food reveals itself most honestly, not in the restaurant interior, but in the open air, with the canal or the market square as the backdrop. The herring cart is the place to start. Raw herring, nieuwe herring, served from a steel tray with diced onion and gherkin, eaten in the traditional way with the head tilted back, the fish held by the tail. The carts appear throughout Amsterdam and across the country, their striped awnings and simple menus unchanged for generations. The fish is the point. Everything else is context. The stroop waffle follows. Two thin waffles pressed together around a layer of warm caramel syrup, made fresh at market stalls on iron plates that have been producing them since the 19th century. The steam rises from the press. The caramel sets as it cools. The market stall moves no faster than it needs to. The cheese markets of Gouda and Alkmaar bring the food outdoors in a different way. The round wheels carried on flat stretchers across the market square. The vendors in white and the weighing house at the center of it all, the transaction happening in the same public square where it has happened for centuries. The wheels are stacked, handled, weighed, and moved in a sequence that the square seems designed to contain. Arranged across the surface of a restaurant table in Amsterdam until there is no cloth visible beneath them. The colors of it, the deep brown of the braised meats, the green of the vegetables, the orange and red of the sambals, photograph as abundance. The meal proceeds slowly, dish by dish, the table remaining full long after the eating has begun. Street food, market food, table food, 3 different speeds, 3 different settings, all of them Dutch. Maastricht. The landscape changes before the city appears. The flatness of the Netherlands gives way to something different here in the south. Hills rising on both sides of the Maas River. Limestone outcrops, tree lines that follow contours instead of canal banks. Maastricht sits in this landscape as a city that belongs to it entirely. Its warm stone buildings and rounded arches and wide cafe terraces reading as distinctly southern, distinctly old, distinctly unlike anything in Amsterdam or Rotterdam or the flat north. The Vrijthof is the center of the city. A wide public square flanked on one side by the Sint-Servaas Basiliek and on the other by the Sint-Janskerk. The two churches facing each other across the open stone space with the confidence of buildings that have been here for a very long time and intend to remain. The cafe terraces that line the square fill in the hours between them, chairs and tables spreading across the stone, the two church facades rising above the roof lines at each end. From above, the Vrijthof reads as a rectangle of open space within the dense medieval street pattern of the city. The two church towers marking its opposite ends. The Sint-Servaas Basiliek fills the eastern edge of the square, a Romanesque basilica of warm yellow stone whose oldest sections date to the 11th century, its towers visible from the surrounding streets and from the Maas riverbank to the north. The interior moves through centuries of addition and alteration, the earliest stonework meeting the later chapels and the treasury that holds the reliquary of the city's founding bishop behind ironwork screens in the south transept. The buck-handled Dominicanen occupies a Gothic Dominican church in the city center, whose nave now holds floor-to-ceiling bookshelves rising to the height of the original arches. The vaulted ceiling remains painted, the choir end holds a cafe, and the shelves stand where the congregation once stood. The stone columns rising between the book stacks, the Gothic windows throwing light across the spines. From the upper gallery level, the full length of the nave is visible, bookshelves and stone arches and painted vaults in the same frame. The conversion so complete that the two uses seem to have always shared the space. The Netherlands is not just a country you visit, it is a country that makes you think differently about what is possible. A place where the land itself was built by human hands, where the windmills of Kinderdijk still turn over polders that should be underwater, where the canals of Amsterdam reflect 4 centuries of ambition, where the tulip fields of the Bollenstreek turn the flat earth into something that does not seem real until you are standing inside it. Every corner of this small country holds something that stays with you long after you have left it behind. A country that built itself from the sea, that turned limitation into invention, that found beauty in precision and warmth in simplicity. The Netherlands reminds us that the most extraordinary places are not always the largest or the loudest. Sometimes they are the ones that ask you to slow down, look closely, and pay attention to what has been carefully made. If this journey moved you, share it with someone who needs to see the world differently. Like, subscribe and stay with us, because the next destination is already waiting, and the world still has so much left to show you.